Have you ever felt so broken, so utterly defeated, that a single dollar felt like a mountain you couldn't climb? For Olivia Hayes, a 24-year-old waitress, drowning in debt that was just another Tuesday. Pushing stale bread around a plate she couldn't afford, humiliation was her only companion. But in the dim light of a greasy spoon diner, a stranger's quiet gesture paying for her pathetic meal was a flicker of impossible hope. She had no idea that this simple act of kindness wasn't random. It was a choice made by a man whose name commanded empires, a man hiding in plain sight, a man who would soon turn her world upside down. The air in The Corner Spoon was thick with the ghosts of 1,000 forgotten conversations clinging to the vinyl booths like the grease from the deep fryer. It was a symphony of clattering plates, the hiss of the grill, and the low, incessant hum of the fluorescent lights overhead. For Olivia Hayes, this symphony was the soundtrack to her slow-motion collapse. At 24, she felt 100. Each day was a marathon of forced smiles, refilled coffees, and the mental gymnastics of calculating tips against the towering wall of her bills. Today was particularly brutal. A Tuesday, the cruelest day of the week, devoid of the weekend's generous tippers and full of the city's impatient, unforgiving lunch crowd. A man at table 7 had complained that his soup was existentially dissatisfying and left her a crumpled napkin with a ketchup smiley face in place of a tip. A family of 6 at table 4 had let their children build a fortress out of sugar packets and salt shakers, and then berated her when their bill was higher than they'd expected. Her feet ached with a deep, pulsating throb, a rhythm that matched the frantic beating of her heart. The pink eviction notice tucked inside her worn purse felt like a block of ice against her hip. 14 days. Her break was a cruel joke. 30 minutes to refuel for another 4 hours of servitude. She slid into the last empty booth, the one by the rattling air conditioner, and pulled out the crumpled $5 bill she'd allowed herself for lunch. Her stomach churned with a mixture of hunger and anxiety. She ordered the cheapest thing on the menu, 2 slices of toast and a cup of lukewarm water. It was pathetic. She was pathetic. As she waited, she watched him. He sat alone at the counter, a ghost in a sea of noise. He wasn't a regular. She would have remembered. He was older, maybe in his late 40s, with a quiet intensity that seemed out of place amidst the diner's chaos. His hair was a distinguished salt and pepper, neatly cut but not ostentatiously so. He wore simple dark trousers and a plain grey sweater that had seen better days, the cuff slightly frayed. He nursed a black coffee, his gaze drifting over the room, not in a predatory way, but with a kind of thoughtful detachment, as if he were an anthropologist studying a strange forgotten tribe. His eyes, a deep and intelligent shade of blue, occasionally flickered towards her. She quickly looked away each time, a hot flush of embarrassment crawling up her neck. She felt seen, her poverty and desperation laid bare under his calm observation. Her toast arrived. Dry, overcooked, but it was food. She ate slowly, trying to make it last, trying to ignore the gnawing emptiness in her gut. When her break was nearly over, she flagged down her co-worker Jessica to pay. Just the toast, Jess. $2.50, Olivia said, trying to sound casual. She slid the $5 bill across the table. Jessica, a woman whose cynicism was her primary shield against the world, rang it up. Card declined. Jessica's voice was a flat, emotionless statement from behind the counter. Olivia's blood ran cold. What, no, I gave you cash. Jessica sighed, her patience already worn thin. I mean your card. The one you used for your coffee this morning. It bounced. Manager says you got to clear the $3 tab before you can order again. So you owe $5.50. $5.50. It might as well have been $1 million. The $5 in her hand was literally the last of her cash until payday on Friday. The eviction notice in her purse suddenly felt heavier, its edges sharper. Panic, cold and sharp, pierced through her. Her face burned with a shame so profound it felt like a physical blow. The entire diner seemed to fall silent, every eye boring into her, witnessing her failure. I don't have it, she whispered, her voice cracking. Not right now. Jessica's expression softened for a fraction of a second before her professional mask slipped back on. Liv, I'm sorry. Rules are rules. Olivia's eyes stung with tears she refused to shed. She was trapped. She couldn't pay. She couldn't leave. She was a prisoner in the very place that was slowly draining the life from her. She looked at the half-eaten piece of toast on her plate and felt a wave of nausea. Then a low, calm voice cut through the thick haze of her humiliation. Put it on my bill. It was the man from the counter. He had walked over so quietly she hadn't even noticed. He stood beside her booth, not looking at her, but at Jessica. He placed a $20 bill on the counter, and for the young lady's trouble, he added his voice a gentle baritone. Please make sure she gets the change from this. Jessica's eyes widened slightly, but she simply nodded, taking the money. Sure thing. The man turned his head slightly, and his blue eyes met Olivia's for the first time. There was no pity in them, no condescension. There was only a quiet understanding, a warmth that felt like the sun breaking through a week of rain. Everyone has those days, he said softly, a faint, kind smile touching his lips. Keep your chin up. And then just as quietly as he had appeared, he was gone. He walked out the door and disappeared into the relentless river of the city street. Olivia sat frozen in the booth, the sounds of the diner rushing back in. The clatter, the hiss, the hum. But they sounded different now. The man's $20 bill sat on the counter, a silent testament to an impossible kindness. Jessica walked over and placed $14.50 on her table. He said to make sure you got this. She said, her voice softer than usual. Olivia stared at the money. It was more than she made in 2 hours. It was enough for groceries. It was enough to breathe for a moment. It wasn't just money. It was a lifeline. A single, inexplicable act of grace from a man in a frayed grey sweater who saw her at her lowest and didn't look away. As she clutched the bills in her hand, the tears she had fought so hard to contain finally fell not from shame, but from a fragile, burgeoning sense of hope. Who was he in a city of 8 million people? He was just a stranger. But for Olivia Hayes, he was the only one who mattered. The $14.50 felt sacred in Olivia's hand. It was more than just paper and ink. It was a tangible piece of grace in a world that had offered her none. That evening, instead of the toast she'd planned for dinner, she bought a small carton of eggs, a loaf of bread, and a container of milk. It was a feast. As she ate, the simple meal felt like a celebration, a quiet rebellion against the crushing weight of her circumstances. The stranger's kindness had done more than pay for a meal. It had restored a small piece of her dignity. But with gratitude came a consuming curiosity. He had vanished as quickly as he'd appeared, a phantom benefactor. She replayed the scene in her mind 100 times. The frayed cuff of his sweater, the calm authority in his voice, the startling blue of his eyes. He wasn't flashy or loud. There was a substance to him, a stillness that was utterly magnetic. "Did you see that guy who paid for my lunch?" she asked Jessica the next day, trying to sound casual as they restocked napkin dispensers. Jessica shrugged her focus on aligning the salt and pepper shakers into perfect rows. "Some guy in a grey sweater. Never seen him before. Why you think he's your Prince Charming?" No, It was nice, you know, Olivia said, her cheeks flushing. People aren't usually that nice. Tell me about it, Jessica grumbled, moving to the next table. A guy at table 9 tried to pay with a coupon for a different restaurant, said the ambiance was similar. You get your hopes up over one decent guy, Liv, and this city will eat you alive. He probably just felt sorry for you. The words stung, mostly because they echoed her own fears. Was that all it was, pity she didn't want to believe it? The look in his eyes hadn't been pity. It was something else, something deeper. Empathy. Recognition. Her obsession grew. She started watching the door of the diner with an almost painful intensity, her heart leaping every time a man of a certain age and build walked in. But he never returned. It was as if he were a mirage, a momentary vision conjured by her desperation. A few days later, while cleaning the booth where she'd been sitting during the incident, her fingers brushed against something wedged between the vinyl cushions. It was a pen. It wasn't a cheap plastic BC. It was heavy, made of a dark, polished wood she didn't recognize with elegant silver accents. It was clearly expensive, profoundly out of place in the corner spoon. There were no logos, no brand names, just a single small and intricate letter A engraved near the clip. It had to be his. She clutched it like a holy relic. This was her only clue, a tangible link to the mysterious man she'd begun to think of as Arthur in her head for the A on the pen. She showed it to Jessica, whose only comment was, "You could probably get $50 for that at a pawn shop." Olivia ignored her. The pen wasn't for selling, it was for finding. The problem was, she had nothing else to go on. He'd left no name, no trace, other than a $20 bill and a whisper of kindness. She tried searching online for Arthur Westport, man pays for waitress's meal, but the digital ocean of the internet offered up nothing but static. Just as this new, fragile hope began to take root in her life, a shadow from her past crept back in. Rick, her ex-boyfriend. He cornered her one evening as she was leaving work, leaning against the grimy brick wall of the alley, a smug grin on his handsome, deceitful face. "Livy, baby," he said, his voice a slick, practiced croon. "Long time no see. You look tired." Rick was a master of the backhanded compliment. He was a creature of charm and chaos, a man who could talk his way into anyone's life and out of any responsibility. Their relationship had been a whirlwind of passion and toxicity, ending 6 months ago when she discovered he'd maxed out her credit card on a can't-miss investment opportunity that turned out to be a poker tournament. "What do you want?" Rick Olivia asked, clutching her purse strap, the wooden pen inside a reassuring weight. "I heard you came into a little money," he said, his eyes gleaming. "Heard some rich guy took a liking to you at the diner. Jessica talks, you know." Olivia's stomach twisted. Of course Jessica talked. It was nothing. A guy paid for my toast, that's it. Come on, Liv. A $20 tip, that's not nothing. Sounds like you've got a sugar daddy. I just need a little help. 200. Just to get back on my feet. I'll pay you back, you know I'm good for it. He wasn't. He had never been good for it. Seeing him now with his easy lies and entitled smirk was like looking at a reflection of all her past mistakes. He was the reason her credit was shot. He was the reason she was so deep in the hole she was digging her way out of. "I don't have any money, Rick," she said, her voice firm, surprising even herself. "The money he gave me paid for my groceries. Now if you'll excuse me, I have to go." She tried to push past him, but he grabbed her arm. His grip wasn't violent, but it was possessive. "Don't be like that, Livy. We were good together." "Don't you remember I remember you stealing from me?" She shot back, yanking her arm free. "Leave me alone, Rick. I mean it." His face darkened for a moment, the charming facade cracking to reveal the ugliness beneath. Fine. Be that way. But don't come crying to me when your rich old man gets tired of you. He sauntered off into the night, leaving Olivia trembling in the alley. The encounter left a sour taste in her mouth. Rick was a vulture drawn to the scent of opportunity. His reappearance was a stark reminder of the world she was trying to escape, a world of desperation and exploitation. Later that night, sitting in her small apartment, she held the wooden pen, rolling it between her fingers. The smooth, cool surface was a contrast to the memory of Rick's clammy grip. The pen represented one world, a world of quiet dignity and unexpected generosity. Rick represented another. For the first time, she felt a powerful resolve to fight for the world the pen symbolized. She didn't know who Arthur was or if she would ever see him again. But he had shown her that another kind of life, another kind of person existed, and she would not let the shadows of her past drag her back down. The mystery of the kind stranger was no longer just a curiosity. It had become her North Star. The week that followed was a study in contrasts. By day, Olivia navigated the sticky tables and demanding patrons of the corner spoon, her reality unchanged. But by night, her world expanded, fueled by the memory of the stranger's kindness and repulsed by Rick's predatory return. She enrolled in an online bookkeeping course. The enrollment fee took the last of her savings, a gamble that felt both terrifying and exhilarating. She studied until her eyes burned the complex language of ledgers and balance sheets, a welcome distraction from the eviction notice that now had only a single week left on its countdown. Opportunity, when it finally arrived, came not through the front door of the diner, but through a side hustle. Jessica, for all her cynicism, had a cousin who ran a high-end catering company. They needed an extra server for a last-minute booking a charity gala. The pay was triple her hourly wage at the diner for a single night's work. Olivia jumped at the chance. The event was held at the Westfield Grand Manor, an estate so opulent it seemed to belong to a different century. Perched on a hill overlooking the city of Westport, its limestone facade glowed under the theatrical lighting. Olivia, dressed in a crisp black and white uniform that felt foreign on her body, felt like an imposter. She walked through marble halls adorned with paintings that were probably worth more than every possession she had ever owned. The air hummed with the quiet confidence of old money and the louder buzz of the newly powerful. Her job was simple: carry a tray of champagne flutes, smile and be invisible. For the first hour she succeeded. She moved through the glittering crowds, a silent phantom offering bubbles and bliss. She saw faces she recognized from the news, and society pages, their laughter echoing in the cavernous ballroom. And then she saw him. He was standing near a set of towering French doors that led to a terrace, engaged in a conversation with a senator and a woman draped in diamonds. It was him, the man from the diner. But it was also not him. The frayed grey sweater was gone, replaced by a bespoke tuxedo that fit him with an understated perfection. His salt and pepper hair was styled, and on his wrist a watch gleamed with a subtle, expensive light. The quiet observer from the counter was now the undeniable center of a powerful orbit. A wave of vertigo washed over Olivia. Her tray trembled in her hands. She quickly turned and retreated towards the kitchens, her heart hammering against her ribs. It couldn't be. The man who had paid for her toast, the kind stranger whose simple pen she carried in her pocket like a talisman, was one of them. She leaned against a cool stainless steel counter, taking deep breaths. Who was he? She had to know. Peeking back out into the ballroom, she watched him, her mind struggling to reconcile the two versions of this man, the humble diner patron and the titan of industry. A senior member of the catering staff, a stern woman named Helen, bustled past. Olivia the host is about to make his welcome speech. Make sure glasses are full in the West Wing." The host, Olivia, asked, her voice barely a whisper. "Who is the host of the event?" Helen gave her an incredulous look. "You don't know it's his house. That's Arthur Vanderbilt, head of Vanderbilt Industries. You know, the biggest tech and real estate developer in the state. Try to keep up. Arthur Vanderbilt." The name hit her like a physical force. Of course, not just Arthur for the A on the pen, but the Arthur Vanderbilt. A man so wealthy and reclusive, he was practically a legend in Westport. His company built the very skyscrapers that defined the city's skyline. He was whispered to be a billionaire many times over. The room began to spin. She felt foolish, naive. Her daydreams of finding the kind stranger and thanking him now seemed absurd. What would she say? "Thank you for the 1450, Mr. Billionaire. It really helped." The chasm between their worlds wasn't just a gap. It was a canyon, vast and impassable. He hadn't been just a kind man. He'd been a king visiting the peasant village, making a small, meaningless gesture of charity. Jessica's words echoed in her ears. "He probably just felt sorry for you." Her shift required her to circulate, so hiding was not an option. With a deep, steadying breath, she picked up a fresh tray of drinks and forced herself back into the fray, determined to remain invisible. She kept to the edges of the room, her eyes fixed on the floor, on the rims of the glasses, on anything but him. As she offered a drink to a woman near a large potted fern, she overheard a conversation that chilled her to the bone. Two men in sharp suits stood nearby, their voices low and venomous. "Vanderbilt looks pleased with himself," one man said, a sneer twisting his lips. "Let him," the other replied. She recognized the speaker from a business magazine she'd flipped through at a newsstand. It was Gregory Finch, the CEO of a rival firm, Finch Global Properties. He was a man with a reputation for corporate savagery. He thinks the Phoenix project is a done deal. He has no idea what's coming for him. I'm going to enjoy watching that whole pristine empire of his crumble to dust. After what he did to my father, it's the least I can do." "Is the asset in place?" the first man asked. Finch took a slow sip of his whiskey. "She is, and she's perfectly positioned. Vanderbilt won't know what hit him. He has a weakness for strays. It will be his undoing." Olivia froze the tray in her hand, suddenly weighing 1,000 pounds. A weakness for strays. The words were like daggers. Was she a stray? Was his kindness at the diner? Not kindness at all, but a pattern, a whim. The conversation painted a picture of Arthur Vanderbilt that was a world away from the gentleman at the counter. It spoke of ruthless deals, old vendettas, and a looming, calculated betrayal. Her head was swimming with confusion and fear. She turned to make her escape, to retreat to the safety of the kitchen, but it was too late. As she pivoted, she found her path blocked. Standing directly in front of her was Arthur Vanderbilt. He wasn't looking at the senator or the woman with the diamonds anymore. He was looking directly at her, and on his face was a slow, dawning look of recognition. The ballroom with its glittering chandeliers and a symphony of hushed conversations faded into a dull, roaring silence. For a long, stretched moment, there was only the space between them, charged with the impossible truth of their dual realities. Olivia's mind raced, searching for an escape, for the right words, for a way to rewind time and remain an anonymous server in a black and white uniform. But Arthur Vanderbilt's expression wasn't one of annoyance or superiority. It was one of genuine, warm surprise. A slow smile spread across his face, the very same kind smile she remembered from the diner, a smile that reached his startlingly blue eyes. "Olivia," he said, his voice a low, calm anchor in her sea of panic. He remembered her name. The fact was so shocking, so unexpected, that it momentarily silenced her frantic thoughts. Mr. Vanderbilt, she managed to stammer, her voice small. She dipped her head, trying to shrink to revert to her role as invisible staff. Champagne. He chuckled softly, a rich, pleasant sound. He took a glass from her tray, his fingers brushing hers for a fleeting second. The contact sent a jolt through her, a spark of electricity that was both terrifying and thrilling. "I believe I owe you an apology," he said, his gaze holding hers, making it impossible to look away. "For the unconventional nature of our first meeting, I hope I didn't embarrass you." "No, not at all," she said too quickly. You were incredibly kind. Thank you. I have something that belongs to you." Her hand instinctively went to the pocket of her apron, where she'd tucked the wooden pen for good luck. Later he said, with a subtle gesture of his head towards the crowd, "Would you mind? I'd like to speak with you for a moment, somewhere quieter." It wasn't a request so much as a gentle command. He led her away from the main throng, through the tall French doors, and onto the stone terrace she'd seen earlier. The cool night air was a welcome relief, chasing away the suffocating heat of her anxiety. The city of Westport glittered below them, a carpet of 1,000,000 tiny lights. "I come to places like the Corner Spoon, sometimes," he began, leaning against the balustrade, turning to face her. "It helps me stay grounded. My life can become an echo chamber. The suits, the boardrooms, the galas. You start to forget what's real. That diner is real." Olivia listened, her heart still beating a wild rhythm against her ribs. She couldn't form a coherent thought, let alone a response. "I saw you that day," he continued, his voice softening. "Long before the issue with your payment. I saw how you were handling your tables. The man with the soup, the family with the unruly children. You had this incredible patience, a quiet grace under pressure. I was impressed. When I saw you were in trouble, I acted on instinct. It had nothing to do with pity." He said the word pity as if he'd plucked it directly from her deepest fear. Hearing him deny it, seeing the sincerity in his eyes, felt like a validation she didn't know she desperately needed. "Here," she said, finally finding her voice. She pulled the pen from her pocket and held it out to him. "You left this." He looked at the pen in her palm, and a different, more wistful smile touched his lips. "My father gave me this when I graduated college. He said a man's character is in the things he holds on to. I thought I'd lost it forever." He took it from her, his fingers once again brushing against hers. "Thank you. I'm more grateful for this than for the $20, I assure you." The mention of money made her blush again. "You didn't have to do that." "Yes, I did," he said simply. He looked out at the city lights. "People assume that because I have all this, that I don't understand struggle. But my father and I built our first business out of a garage. I remember what it's like to count every single dollar, to have more month left at the end of the money. I don't forget that. I can't." He was opening a door, showing her a glimpse of the man behind the myth. He wasn't just a billionaire. He was a son, a man who had known hardship, a man who felt a need to connect with a world he was now so far removed from. The canyon between them began to feel a little less vast. So he said, turning back to her, with a playfully curious expression, "Tell me, Olivia Hayes, what is someone with your grace under pressure doing working at the Corner Spoon?" she found herself telling him. About her dream of being an accountant, a dream she'd deferred to take care of her sick mother who had passed away 2 years ago. About the mountain of medical debt her mother had left behind. About the online course she'd just started. She spoke with a raw honesty she hadn't intended, but something about his calm presence made it feel safe. He listened. He didn't interrupt or offer solutions. He just listened his full attention on her, making her feel like the most important person at the entire gala. Their fragile bubble of connection was abruptly, violently burst. "Well, well, well, look what we have here." The voice was slick, oily, and horribly familiar. Olivia's blood ran cold. She turned to see Rick standing in the doorway of the terrace. He wasn't in a uniform. He was wearing a gaudy, ill-fitting blazer and a smug, possessive smirk. He must have crashed the party, talked his way past security with his practiced charm. "Livy, baby, I knew you were moving up in the world, but I didn't realize you'd landed the biggest whale in the whole ocean," Rick said, his eyes flicking from Olivia to Arthur with greedy assessment. "Rick, what are you doing here?" Olivia's voice was a panicked whisper. "You need to leave." "I just wanted to congratulate my girl," he said, stepping onto the terrace, deliberately invading their space. He put a familiar, unwanted hand on Olivia's arm. "See, old man, Livy and I have history. A lot of it. She might be serving you drinks tonight, but last year—" He let the insinuation hang in the air, thick and poisonous. Olivia felt sick. She tried to pull away, but his grip tightened. Arthur Vanderbilt didn't raise his voice. He didn't move a muscle. He simply looked at Rick's hand on Olivia's arm, and his blue eyes turned to ice. The warmth was gone, replaced by a formidable absolute authority that was more terrifying than any shout. "Take your hand off her," Arthur said. The words were quiet, but they carried the weight of an avalanche. Rick for the first time seemed to realize he had miscalculated. He faltered, his smirk vanishing. "Hey, I'm just talking to my girlfriend." "No, you're not, Arthur," stated, taking a half step forward. "You are harassing one of my guests, and you are trespassing on my property. You have 10 seconds to remove yourself before my security team does it for you. And I assure you they will be far less polite than I am being." He radiated a power that was palpable, an unshakable certainty that left no room for argument. Rick, the consummate con man, finally met a wall he couldn't talk his way through. He released Olivia's arm as if it were red-hot, threw a venomous glare at her, and then scurried back into the ballroom and disappeared. Olivia stood, trembling, the phantom sensation of Rick's grip still on her skin. Arthur turned back to her, the icy authority in his eyes melting away, replaced by a deep concern. "Are you all right?" he asked gently. She could only nod, unable to speak. He had defended her. He had protected her. He hadn't questioned Rick's claims or looked at her with suspicion. He had simply stood by her side. In that moment, he wasn't a billionaire or a legend. He was Arthur, the kind man from the diner. And she realized with a terrifying and wonderful certainty that she was beginning to fall for him. The aftermath of the gala was a quiet explosion. Rick, in a final act of spite, had tipped off a notorious gossip blogger. The next morning, an article appeared online with the headline, "Vanderbilt's new charity case, Billionaire romances Waitress, fends off jealous ex." The story was a toxic cocktail of half-truths and malicious speculation, painting Olivia as a Cinderella in waiting and a damsel in distress, while portraying Arthur as a predator with a penchant for vulnerable young women. Olivia read it on her phone during her break at the diner, the words blurring through a film of hot, humiliated tears. The article, while factually inaccurate in its tone and intent, had one devastating effect. It threw a blinding, unwelcome spotlight on her. Suddenly, she was no longer invisible. Regulars at the diner looked at her differently, with a new, speculative curiosity. Whispers followed her as she carried plates of eggs and bacon. Jessica's attitude shifted from wry cynicism to a complex blend of envy, concern and resentment. "So you're really doing this, huh?" Jessica asked one afternoon, leaning against the counter while Olivia polished cutlery. "Dating Arthur Vanderbilt." "I'm not dating him," Olivia insisted, rubbing a fork so hard she was surprised it didn't bend. "I've spoken to him twice." "Well, the whole city thinks you are. You'd better be careful, Liv. Guys like that, they don't date girls like us. We're a diversion, an amusement. When they're done playing, they put their toys away." The words were cruel, but they mirrored the fears already festering in Olivia's heart. Was that all she was, a stray A diversion Arthur called her that afternoon? Her heart leapt when his full name, flashed on her screen. He must have gotten her number from the catering company. "I've seen the article," he said, his voice laced with regret. "I am so sorry, Olivia. This is my fault. My world can be invasive. I never should have exposed you to it." "It's not your fault," she said, her voice small. "It's Rick's. Nevertheless, I want to make it right. Would you be willing to have dinner with me tonight? Somewhere private. Somewhere we can actually talk away from gossip bloggers and ex-boyfriends." She hesitated for only a second. Despite her fear, despite the chaos, her desire to see him again, to understand the man behind the headlines, was stronger. Okay. He didn't take her to a 5-star restaurant. Instead, a discreet car picked her up and drove her to a small, unassuming building in a quiet part of the city. It was a private library he owned, a sanctuary filled with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, the air smelling of old paper and leather. They ate a simple meal of pasta and salad, brought in from a local Italian place. Here, away from the prying eyes of the world, their connection deepened. He didn't talk about business or billions. He talked about his love for history, pointing out first editions of books that had shaped his thinking. He asked about her bookkeeping course, listening with genuine interest as she explained the difference between debits and credits. He made her feel intelligent and interesting. For the first time in years, she felt like more than just a waitress, more than just a collection of debts and worries. He also opened up about his past and the animosity with Gregory Finch. Finch's father was my father's business partner years ago. Arthur explained, his expression hardening slightly. He betrayed my dad, embezzled a fortune, and nearly bankrupted our family. It destroyed my father's health. Gregory inherited his father's company and his hatred for my family. He believes we ruined them when it was their own greed that did it. He's been trying to destroy me ever since I took over Vanderbilt Industries. The story cast the overheard conversation at the Gala in a new, more sinister light. He said he had an asset in place. Olivia said the words, tumbling out before she could stop them. He said you had a weakness for strays. Arthur's eyes met hers, and for a moment he looked unguarded, almost vulnerable. He would see it that way. He sees any act of kindness as a weakness to be exploited. It's how men like him operate. The conversation solidified their bond, framing them as allies against a common threat. Their dates continued in this vein, private, simple, and real. He would come to her tiny apartment, and they would watch old movies. She would help him with the crossword puzzle in the newspaper. He in turn would help her with her accounting homework, his brilliant mind simplifying the most complex concepts for her. He never once made her feel inferior. He celebrated her small victories, like when she scored a 98 on her midterm exam. He was becoming her friend, her mentor, and something more that she was too afraid to name. But Gregory Finch was not a man to remain in the shadows. Seeing the gossip columns linking Olivia to Arthur, he saw not a romance, but an opportunity. a weakness to exploit. One afternoon, as Olivia was leaving her apartment, a sleek black car pulled up beside her. A man in a tailored suit got out. "Ms. Hayes, Mr. Finch would like a word." Against her better judgment, curiosity and a sense of dread compelled her to get in. She was driven to the gleaming, sterile headquarters of Finch Global Properties. Gregory Finch's office was the polar opposite of Arthur's library. It was all glass and chrome, a cold, modern space that offered a panoramic view of the city, a view that deliberately looked down on the Vanderbilt Tower. Finch was charming, his smile, as polished and insincere as his office. "Ms. Hayes, thank you for coming. I'll be direct. I know you're in a difficult financial position." He slid a folder across the vast desk towards her. "I'm prepared to offer you a solution." She opened it. Inside was a cashier's check made out to her name. The amount made her gasp. It was enough to pay off all her debts, her mother's medical bills, everything. It was enough to start a new life. "What is this for?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Information," Finch said smoothly. "Arthur is a very private man. I need to know about his upcoming projects, specifically the Phoenix project, his schedules, his private conversations. You're in a unique position to acquire that information. Give me something I can use against him, and this is yours. No one ever has to know." The offer hung in the air, seductive and poisonous. It was the ultimate test. She could take it. She could solve all her problems in an instant. All she had to do was betray the one person who had shown her true kindness, the man she was falling in love with. She looked at Finch, at his predatory smile and his cold, calculating eyes. He was the embodiment of everything Rick was just packaged in a more expensive suit. He was the antithesis of everything Arthur was. With a clarity that surprised her, she pushed the folder back across the desk. "No," she said, her voice clear and steady. "I'm not for sale." Finch's smile vanished. His face contorted into a mask of rage. "You foolish girl. You think he actually cares about you? You are a temporary amusement. You're choosing him over a new life. You will regret this." His threat echoed in her ears as she left the building, but she didn't feel regret. She felt strong. She had been tested, and she had not broken. She didn't tell Arthur about the meeting. She didn't want to worry him, or to seem like she was reporting back to him. But her refusal had sealed her fate in Finch's eyes. If she wouldn't be his pawn, she would be his target. The climax came a week later. Arthur was on the verge of closing the Phoenix project, a massive urban renewal deal that would transform a derelict part of Westport and be the crowning achievement of his career. On the morning the deal was to be finalized, a story broke in the city's most respected financial journal. The article claimed that Vanderbilt Industries was the subject of a federal investigation for corporate espionage. It alleged that the company had hacked into Finch Global's servers to steal proprietary data related to the Phoenix project bid. And as proof, it included screenshots of emails and encrypted data logs. The source of the leak, an anonymous insider. The most damning piece of evidence, however, was a security log showing a data transfer from Vanderbilt servers to an external IP address. An IP address that traced back to the public Wi-Fi of a small coffee shop. A coffee shop directly across the street from Olivia Hayes' apartment. The article heavily implied that the anonymous insider was Arthur's new girlfriend, the down-on-her-luck waitress who had sold him out for a payday from his biggest rival. It was a perfectly crafted trap, and Olivia had just walked right into the center of it. The world imploded. The story was a bombshell, and Olivia was at its epicenter. Within hours, her face was plastered across every news site and television screen in Westport. The narrative was brutal and swift. She was the gold-digging waitress, the Mata Hari of the working class, who had seduced a lonely billionaire only to betray him for his rival. Gregory Finch's carefully constructed lie was perfect. It preyed on every existing prejudice about class, power, and relationships. It was believable because people wanted to believe it. Her phone rang incessantly with calls from reporters offering money for her side of the story. A horde of them camped outside her apartment building, their cameras flashing like strobe lights every time a shadow moved behind her window. She felt like a trapped animal. The sanctuary of her small apartment had become a cage. The cruelest blow came from the people she knew. Jessica sent a single text message: "I told you to be careful. I can't believe you did this to him." The message was a dagger to the heart. Even her landlord, who had been hounding her for rent, called to say he didn't want that kind of trouble in his building, and that her eviction was now non-negotiable. She was completely and utterly alone. The world had turned against her based on a lie. She sat on her floor, the eviction notice in one hand, her phone buzzing with hateful messages in the other, and felt a despair so profound it threatened to swallow her whole. She hadn't heard from Arthur. Silence. A terrible, deafening silence that felt like a verdict. Had he believed it? After everything, had he decided she was just another one of Finch's assets? The thought was more painful than anything the media could throw at her. The pressure on Arthur was immense. The news sent Vanderbilt Industries' stock into a nosedive. The board of directors convened an emergency meeting, their voices a chorus of panic and accusation. They urged him, demanded him to cut ties with Olivia immediately. Issue a statement, the lead board member, a stern man named Robert, advised. Denounce her. Portray yourself as the victim of a honey trap. It's the only way to control the narrative and save the Phoenix deal. Arthur sat at the head of the vast mahogany table, listening to their frantic advice. He looked at the damning evidence they projected onto the screen, the doctored emails, the forged data logs, the IP address from the coffee shop across from Olivia's apartment. It was a compelling case, an open and shut betrayal. But as he looked at the data, he wasn't thinking about stock prices or business deals. He was thinking about the look in Olivia's eyes when she'd talked about her bookkeeping course. He was thinking about her fierce integrity when she'd returned his expensive pen. He was thinking about the strength in her voice when she'd told him about her deferred dreams. He thought about the woman who helped him with crossword puzzles and felt more at home in his library than at a gala. He knew her. Not the caricature in the headlines, but the real woman. And the woman he knew was incapable of this. He stood up, silencing the room. "No," he said, his voice calm but absolute. "There will be no statement denouncing Olivia Hayes." Robert sputtered. "Arthur, be reasonable. She's a liability we cannot afford." "She is not a liability," Robert Arthur said, his gaze sweeping across the stunned faces of the board. "She is the woman I love, and I trust her. Implicitly. Gregory Finch has made one critical error. He has underestimated both of us. This meeting is adjourned. I'm going to handle this." Leaving the boardroom in chaos, Arthur made one phone call to his head of security, a formidable and intensely loyal ex-intelligence officer named Peterson. "Tear it apart," Peterson Arthur commanded. "I want to know everything. The data, the source of the leak, the coffee shop Wi-Fi. I want to know who Finch paid and how he did it. Spare no expense." His second call was to Olivia. When her phone rang displaying his name, her breath caught in her throat. She answered with a trembling hand, preparing for the final blow. "Olivia," his voice came through the line, not with anger or accusation, but with a deep, unwavering warmth. "Are you okay?" Tears streamed down her face, tears of pure, unadulterated relief. You don't believe them," she whispered. "Never," he said, his conviction a lifeline. "I believe in you. I am on my way. Don't talk to anyone. Don't look at the news. Just wait for me." True to his word, a car arrived for her, navigating the media circus with practiced efficiency. It didn't take her to one of his mansions, but to a secluded modern cabin he owned, deep in the woods outside the city, a place of total privacy and peace. When she saw him standing on the porch, she ran into his arms, burying her face in his chest, and finally allowed herself to break down. He held her, stroking her hair, letting her cry it all out. He offered me money, she confessed, her voice muffled by his shirt. "Finch, he offered me a check to spy on you." I told him no. "I know," Arthur said softly. "I knew you would." For the next 48 hours, the world raged on outside their sanctuary, but inside, they were a team. Peterson and his cybersecurity experts worked around the clock, and Arthur kept Olivia looped in on every development. They discovered the coffee shop's Wi-Fi router had been physically tampered with a sophisticated clone device installed to spoof IP addresses. They found the anonymous insider from the Financial Journal, a junior reporter who had been paid a significant sum through a series of shell corporations that led back to Finch Global. They even found the digital artist who had been contracted to create the forged emails, a freelancer who under pressure was willing to testify. The final piece of the puzzle was the most brilliant. Peterson's team uncovered a deleted security camera file from a building across from the coffee shop. It showed a technician from a company owned by Finch Global installing the device in the dead of night, a week before the story broke. Finch's plot, so perfect on the surface, had unraveled under the focused application of Arthur's resources and his unshakable faith in Olivia. With the evidence compiled, Arthur didn't just leak it to the press. He called a full press conference at the Vanderbilt Tower. He stood at the podium not alone, but with Olivia standing proudly by his side. He didn't just present the evidence exonerating himself and Olivia. He laid out Finch's entire conspiracy step by criminal step. He exposed the bribery, the hacking, the fraud. The fallout for Gregory Finch was immediate and catastrophic. His stock didn't just dip, it evaporated. Federal investigators armed with Arthur's evidence raided his offices. Finch was ruined, his empire crumbling to dust, just as he had wished upon Arthur. In the quiet aftermath, as the news cycle moved on to its next scandal, Olivia and Arthur stood on the terrace of his private library, looking out at the city. The Phoenix Project was saved, his name was cleared, and most importantly, they were together. "You know," Olivia said, turning to him, "you never had to do any of this. You could have just paid my bill at the diner and walked away forever." He took her hands in his. "Walking away would have been the biggest mistake of my life. That day in the diner, I didn't just see a woman in distress. I saw strength. I saw integrity. I saw someone who deserved a little bit of kindness. I just never imagined that I would be the one who needed her kindness more." He didn't propose a lavish wedding or a life of idle luxury. He proposed something far more real. "I've cleared your debts," he said simply. "Not as a gift, but as an investment. I want to invest in you, Olivia. Finish your course. I know this great little commercial space downtown. It would make a perfect accounting firm, or a bookstore, or whatever you want it to be. I don't want to be your savior. I want to be your partner." Tears welled in Olivia's eyes, but this time they were tears of joy. He saw her not as a project, but as an equal. Their love story hadn't been born in a fairy tale castle, but forged in the gritty reality of a greasy spoon diner, tested by betrayal and solidified by a foundation of absolute trust. It wasn't about a billionaire saving a poor waitress. It was about two people finding in each other the one thing money could never buy: a home. In the end, it was never about the money. The story began with a simple act of kindness, a meal paid for, a moment of dignity restored. But it blossomed into a testament to the power of seeing the true character of a person beyond their circumstances. Olivia and Arthur's journey wasn't a fairy tale, it was a real-life trial by fire. They faced down vicious rivals' public humiliation and the deep-seated prejudices of a world that tried to tear them apart. Their love proved that the strongest foundations aren't built with wealth or status, but with unwavering trust, mutual respect, and the courage to stand by someone when the world tells you to walk away. Theirs is a reminder that the greatest investments we can ever make are in each other. If their story moved you, please give this video a like, share it with someone who needs a little hope, and don't forget to subscribe for more true stories that will touch your heart.